Hi. Thanks, everybody. So I'm Paige Roberts. Like she said, I'm a fisheries ecologist. I live in Colorado, and I'm working on Somalia. So GIS ends up being pretty important for me to do a lot of the work that I'm doing. I am presenting today on a project I've been working on for over the last year or so called Project Badweyn. Badweyn means ocean or seas in Somali. So it's a project to attempt to map Somali coastal resources. I am part of a foundation called One Earth Future, and we have a mission, peace through governance. So we try to do research and convene stakeholders to catalyze systems that eliminate the root causes of war from Colorado. We do it in a lot of different ways. We have 7 implementation programs. Mine is Secure Fisheries. I don't think, yeah, it doesn't work. It's down there on the right. And we look at this from a sort of food security and economic security perspective. So we try to provide research and analysis that will help the developing coastal communities be able to have a strong economic security through fisheries into the future and supporting coastal livelihoods. We came out of a different program called Oceans Beyond Piracy, and that's why we're focused on Somalia. So the piracy, one of the common sort of causes of piracy that you hear in the media and from pirates themselves is that they are just vigilantes trying to protect their coast. And that's not really entirely true. We've been able to show that it's really based on economic opportunity, and people are much more likely to turn to criminal acts like piracy or smuggling and other maritime crimes when they don't have a strong economy in their region. So that's one reason for why Somalia. It's also a pretty interesting and challenging place to do this kind of work. There's a map of it. I wasn't sure in a room full of geographers if I really needed to put up a map of Somalia, but just in case, it's on the Horn of Africa. And it's developing. So there was a civil war there in 1991, and it went through a pretty long period of a lot of violence and conflict. Basically didn't have a government for a long time, but that's developing. So they have a central government now and fairly strong and growing regional governments. So they're working on it. They're growing. They also have an expanding blue economy and developing coastal communities. And we've provided some research on especially the blue economy section. We've produced a report called Securing Somali Fisheries that quantified how much foreign fishing is happening in Somali waters and and domestic fishing and how big of an impact that could make on their economy. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of fisheries and marine resource data. What information there is out of date. It's not readily available to the public, and it's not regionally specific. It's not centralized. And there just isn't a lot of it. It's also really hard to collect. It's still pretty dangerous to go there, especially if you're not Somali. So there's quite a few challenges here. So to try to fill some of those gaps, especially availability of data and general knowledge of coastal resources there, we created a free online interactive map that provides information about a few different areas about coastal resources and human activities that are using those resources and how they might conflict. So we really wanted to look at the interactions between these things. So Somalis, they know where there's fishing communities, they know that they are fishing, but they don't necessarily think much about how that fishing could impact coral reefs or how the shipping in the area could be impacting their environment that they rely on for their fishing resources. So we wanted to try to make a public platform to show some of these interactions. Our hope is that it will be useful in Somalia for Somali fishers and coastal communities to understand their resources a little bit better. We also really would love for it to be able to be used in the management plans that are just starting to be created there. They just have a federal law that was passed in 2014, so they're growing some of these regulatory measures, and we're hoping that we can influence some government officials, either at the federal or local level, trying to get them to think more holistically about their management plans. We also want it to be useful for international development and aid groups. So there's a lot of interest from the EU, some US, even Middle Eastern countries that want to invest in building up capacity in coastal communities there. There's a lot of opportunity for fishing. They have long coastline, a lot of resources, and they want to take advantage of that and be able to capitalize on the market value of those fish too. If Somalis could export to the EU, that would be amazing. So there's not a lot of coordination among these international development groups, so I'm hoping that in just a little while the map can be useful for them too, to see who's already doing projects in places and how they might be able to coordinate. There's also a fair amount of private investment interest in fisheries in Somalia. So there's a lot of diaspora, so Somalis that have moved away and now are coming back into the country since it's a little safer now, and want to invest in their communities. So how we did it. I looked at a lot of coastal web atlases. We saw a really great one yesterday, the Northeast Coastal Web Atlas is really amazing, and I like that one a lot. And then, so with that kind of in mind, I searched for data. Like I said, there's not any original data, so except for some that we've sort of created ourselves. So I searched for publicly available data sets, and this is a place where I think I've learned a lot here. I think I've picked up on some that I might be able to incorporate later. So fish and invertebrates and habitats from all publicly available data. I used some satellite imagery, and I also used automatic identification system vessel tracking for fishing vessels and shipping vessels. So that's a satellite tracking system. I did all of my analyses in ArcMap, and don't throw things at me. I didn't build this in an Esri product. That was mostly our communications team. We have a lot of branding control that they like to have on these kinds of things. So the web team built it in D3. But we did use the ArcMap or Arc Online products to export things in the right formats and get them looking right for the web. We also created some informational pages to really get people to start thinking about how these things work together and how invertebrates, whether or not they're sustainable, which ones are sustainable, and how they could help Somali livelihoods if they're used sustainably. So included in the map, it starts pretty basic. I think we were supposed to have a presentation about marineregions.org, but I guess it's not happening today. But we use their data. And we also use, the UN has a database of all of the declared exclusive economic zones and contested areas, which is what you're seeing in purple there. There's contested areas for their declared EEZ by Yemen and in the south from Kenya. And then we used Reefs at Risk from the World Resources Institute and the UN Environment Ocean Data Viewer data for coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass. And we just plotted those as verbatim as they are with aesthetic changes. A little bit more complicated was the fishes and invertebrates. So we have a little bit of catch data from spattering from different times and places, certainly not coast-wide. And so but we do know which species are commercially important, and we've also talked to some Somali coastal communities, and so we compiled a list of the most important fish in Somali waters, domestically and to the foreign fishers that are working there. And I combined them into 18 different categories so that for mapping purposes, it's a little bit easier. You can see all the groupers in one place. And the map is showing the percent chance that you would find a grouper in that half-degree by half-degree square. So it's definitely not perfect. I would love to make it more specific, regionally specific, even locally specific. But right now, this is kind of the best that I can do. But it works okay. So you can see in the map on the right, the pink dots are local landing sites, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit later. And then the sort of darker pink blob along the coast is a foreign trawling vessel, and you can see that they both overlap with this grouper range. So they are probably both catching grouper, and in fact, we know that they are. And that's a potential point of conflict that could be really important. And we actually know that there has been conflict between those the vessels that are trawling off the coast there, they're foreign vessels, and the domestic fishers. There's been some violence between them. Other interactions that you might be able to think of, a lot of them are pretty obvious. Overfishing, we know that that's happening. A lot of about half of the fish categories that I map are actually unsustainable right now in Somali waters. There's potential for shipping lanes overlapping with fishing areas or competing for port access with fishers. Pollution and sensitive ecosystems that are damaged by that, and increasing development. Mogadishu is the capital of Somalia, and it's expanding relatively quickly, and it's also the biggest port. So there's potential to impact artisanal communities there. For human activities, this was the most heavy GIS lift in this project. I use satellite imagery, like the picture that you're seeing, to literally count boats on the coast of Somalia. This might be the only time that it's an advantage that Somalia is really arid and doesn't have a vegetated coastline, that I can see the boats. There's probably a fancy machine learning way to do this, but it would have taken me longer to figure that out, so I just counted them. I scanned the shoreline, marked a place. This is Bargal, which is in the very northeastern corner of the country. And I counted the boats and then mapped them by size based on the number of boats. There, before this, had never been a comprehensive map of local landing sites in Somalia. So I think that this is going to be pretty important, especially for future management policies. We also mapped foreign fishing. So you'll see a lot of these maps are pretty general. For this, I used Indian Ocean Tuna Commission data, and I combined it over the entire time period that it's available. It's about 50 years, I think. And it's only one fleet. It's the purse seine fleet for tuna. I really just wanted to see where there's a big concentration of foreign fishing, but I didn't necessarily want to hand a map to the pirates that say, here's where people are fishing. Now you can go get them. There is the foreign fishing is really contentious in Somalia, so we don't want to, stoke the fire. And this is foreign fishing for coastal species. So this is what I had mapped on a couple of slides ago. So I used vessel tracking data for a fleet of trawlers that I know are operating there. We know it from some people that we've talked to that have seen them. And so we got a time series of their trawling, and we're able to map their main trawling areas. And from that, I found that they were only trawling, and this makes sense because bottom, I guess I should probably explain since geographers, not fishers. Bottom trawling is dragging a net along the bottom to catch fish. You drag it behind a boat. It can be really destructive to the habitat there. But because you drag it across the bottom, you usually do it in shallow water. So they were fishing in 100 meters and shallower. So we also know that there are trawlers in the north and in the south, but I don't have tracks for those. So I basically mapped the 100-meter contour and shallower for those, and just to get an estimate of where they might be working. I used similar tracking data for shipping vessels. Again, a really basic map just to show where there is and where there is not shipping traffic, and where it's the most dense. Pirates are known for attacking merchant vessels, so again, not a map for pirates. And we mapped the major ports as well. So my hope is that this can be used to look at some of these interactions and really understand better what's happening in Somali waters in a lot of different ways than just we have a lot of fish and we want to catch it and we want to export it to the EU or wherever we can. It's more complicated than that, and I want to be able to show people that and have especially managers and government officials understand that when they're trying to expand their fishery, they're actually impacting a lot of other areas. I would love to identify potential areas of conflict, so that's going to take adding a lot more data to this map. But I would really love to do some of the things that I've seen around with some great models of where there are areas of impact. I want to get, like I said, more information out there about fish types, sustainability, and potential conservation in a Somali context. It's really not something that is talked about a lot there. And create some holistic management measures around that. I also really want to use it to foster collaboration among the international community. Like I said, there's a lot of interest in developing fishing communities there, but there's not a lot of organizations talking to each other about what they're doing and how they might be able to work together and really leverage their funding into long-term solutions for Somali communities. And it's a really basic platform, and I want to develop it and change it and add a lot more. So coming up, that's me and my colleague. We presented this at the Somali Land Investment Forum in Hargeisa, which is probably the safest place in Somalia that you can go. It's also, some colleagues of mine presented it at the Somalia Fisheries Forum just last week. So people there have seen it and commented on it, and we're slowly getting feedback from them and from the government. It's mostly been really positive, and everybody's just excited to see information about Somalia. I want to add a lot of missing layers. This is just a couple of examples of what I want to do. Development projects, like I said, infrastructure, like where are there processing plants? Where are there jetties for fishers to use? Roads, really important for market access and potentially for development projects. If a landing site catches a lot of fish but doesn't have a road going to it, then where is all that fish going? And a lot more. I have a million ideas and even more since I've been at this conference. So, like I said, I want to examine these interactions, and my real pie in the sky goal would be for it to be used in management plans. Obviously, it needs to come a long way before that can happen, but I would really love at some point down the road to see a marine spatial plan for parts of Somalia. I'm also collecting feedback. So we have on the website, you can take a survey in English or Somali about the map, but both the usability of it and if there's data that anybody would like to contribute. So that's Project Badweyn. You can find it at projectbadweyn.org or at securefisheries.org, which is our main website. I'm really interested to hear some feedback and other data sources potentially, because I know you all have a totally different set of knowledge than I do. So if you have comments, email me or tell me right now.